All right, so to our two speakers today, we want you to diva the mic. Now, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are so excited to have General Conference starting, and some of you may have noticed that we are presenting you with a question today. Does anyone know what that question is? Thank you. Where are the young people? If you like these t-shirts and would like one, you can sign up for one in the corner. We just want to encourage you to remember that young people are the current leaders of the church and to keep them as a priority. And to expand upon that theme, we have two special speakers today. Our first is Reverend Bradley Laurvick, the head of the Rocky Mountain delegation. Brad is a young adult clergy person who serves the people of Denver, and he is a graduate of MDiv School of Theology and the past chair of the United Methodist Student Movement. Let's give it up for Brad.
In the congregation where I serve, we start our time together with one person saying it's good to be here, and everyone else says it's great to be here. It's good to be here.
It's great to be here.
It certainly is. The invitation to be with you today to speak is a gift. The invitation was also very simple and very broad. Talk about young people and the church. My thanks to the coalition and its partners for making young people such a prominent part of your work, a prominent part of your discussions, your prayers, and a prominent part of your action. I want to reflect with you briefly today on our denomination's relevance and relationship to young people. I want to begin with the conversations that hopefully can remind us that our work here at General Conference 2012 affect the denomination's relevance and the denomination's relationships with, to, and for young people. I also want to begin with the acknowledgement that more and more people, especially young people, every day are identifying themselves as having no religious affiliation. These are people who recite the ever-present mantra, and you can join me if you'd like, I'm spiritual, but not religious. We've all heard it, but have we really asked ourselves, what are they saying to us? This is a deep question. What do they really mean in this statement that I'm spiritual but not religious? What I think is beneath such comments and opinions is a deeper, unspoken reality. What many of these people are saying, even if they aren't putting it into these exact words, are things like, I'm spiritual but not a fan of dogma. I think they're saying, I'm spiritual but I'm not a fan of institutional BS. And I think they're saying, I'm spiritual, but I'm not a fan of excluding people. You see, they tie these things to religion. Now, if that's religion, then I'm spiritual, but not religious. You see, it's not that people have no religious affiliation. It's that fewer and fewer people, especially young people, want to affiliate with what religion has become. Religion needs to be culturally redefined. This is part of our responsibility as United Methodists. We need to offer a place where people can be religious in a way that is relevant and that is relational. We need to reposition what it means to claim a religious identity. What needs to be repositioned is a religious identity that's about community, accountability, and the chance to contribute to something bigger than yourself. Those are the things that make religion something I can believe in. That's what I'm looking for, and I know I'm not alone. I hear people, the spiritual but not religious people, all around me begging for these things. It's so funny, I spent a week out at Google working with some folks in the California area discussing what it is to be spiritual and mindful in today's age. And they would continue to tell me, oh, I'm spiritual but not religious. And I'd say, okay. And then they'd say things like, however, I really am looking for a group of people I can share my thoughts with. Well, I'm spiritual but not religious, but, you know, I think I would grow more as a person if I had a group of people I could check in with regularly that would help hold me accountable for my own growth. You know, I'm spiritual but not religious, but I am loving these new online tools that let me give to something bigger than myself and be a part of a larger movement. And I had to look at them and say, you don't get it. You are religious. You just don't realize you are. This is what we can claim. Because what we're talking about here is community, accountability, and the chance to contribute to something bigger than yourself. Do these sound familiar? Because they should. We do what they're longing for. Well, let me rephrase that. We do what they're longing for when we're not caught up in the dogma, the institutional BS, and excluding people. So here in Tampa, we are faced with a question. And I want you to hear my words very carefully. In the days to come, will we do church work, or will we do the work of the church? Because there is a big difference in these phrases. You see, church work is the religion that pushes people right out of our open doors. But the work of the church is what can satisfy the longing not just of young people, but of every generation. I want to remind us that changing our structure won't clothe the naked. Because changing our structure is just church work, unless that new structure gets out of the way for the work of the church. Amen. Studying ordained ministry won't feed the hungry, because studying ministry is just church work, unless that new understanding of ministry will equip and hold accountable those who do the work of the church in every way, lay or ordained. And simply discussing human sexuality will not revitalize the lives of the broken, because discussing who's in and who's out, who's compatible and who's incompatible, those conversations can turn into simply church work unless we realize that it's the actions that follow, unless we embrace all of God's children just as we have all been created, which is the true work of the church. The work of the church is about relevance and relationship, offered by a church that focuses on community, accountability, and the chance to contribute to something bigger than ourselves. This is my world as a young person, but this is not unique to people born after this date in a certain year. This is the worldview of God's people. Because Jesus' teachings on love, acceptance, justice, and hope are timeless. John Wesley's emphasis on a grace that meets us, accepts us, and encourages us on, that's timeless teaching. I invite us as we continue about the work of the church in this place to create the kind of place where people can understand community, where people can be held accountable, and where we all have the chance to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, bringing God's kingdom not then but now. Because that, for me, is what religion is about. That is what the work of the church is about. And that is what I invite us to be about as the people called Methodist. May you be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
Thank you, Bradley. Our next speaker is Tyler Sitt. Tyler is a Methodist born and raised. Yeah, let's give him up. Yeah. Tyler grew up in Minnesota as a member of Discover United Methodist Church. That's right. He is a graduate of Boston University and a seminarian at Candler University, getting his Master of Divinity. Tyler is also the LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender coordinator of the North American chapter of the World Student Christian Federation. Thank you, Tyler.
My name is Tyler Sitt, and by the fabulous grace of God, I am a disciple of Christ. Yes, God's grace is big, it is wide, and it is deep, and it is large, larger than this extra, extra, extra large t-shirt I have. God is good all the time. American Apparel sizing is not. And I'm glad that the grace of God is really, really big, because right now, you know what? I'm seeing a lot of young adults who aren't getting a lot of grace from the church. But I am seeing young adults who are being spoken to by God. So when we approach this conversation about young adults, I don't want to hear talk about how the church needs to tell young people about God. I want to hear about how the church approaches young people, assuming that we have heard things from God that you don't know about yet, and we're excited to talk about it. That is the most we can hope for from within these church walls. Or maybe that's the wrong word, because did you hear that Nigerian woman preach today? Anyone there? Nigerian woman preaching? She talked about in Africa, people coming together under all circumstances to worship God. And there was a church with walls, but not a roof. And there was a church with roof, but not walls. And this is how I want us to think about young adult ministry, because right now, the church is inviting young adults to a place with walls, but without a roof. Which, by the way, reminds me a little bit of when people take an open-faced box and put puppies in, and then videotape it and stream it online. Anyone know what I'm talking about with the puppies? That's what's happening to young adults. Let me tell you what these walls sound like. Tyler, you know, I had acoustic guitars in our worship, but young adult people aren't coming. Or, Tyler, our pastor tweets, but young adult people still aren't here. What's the problem? I built up this young adult box with acoustic guitars and tweeters, and none of the young people are staying in. I don't get it. Let me tell you one thing. Young adults don't like being put into boxes. And you know, I think that's always been the case, but the funny part about this is that as we're in these boxes, we have internet connection to like 5 other boxes and blogs about people who have broken out of the boxes. And so we're not going to settle anymore. And so I think our church has to be something that's more like a roof without walls. We still want to provide protection for young people, support for young people, discipleship for young people, but we don't want to trap them in. And maybe one way that I like to think about this is that the church can be like a tree. I'm an eco person. So we can find nourishment from the church. We can find shelter and shade, but not control. We can find agency in the church. We can graft in new ideas, but not box them in. So I work for the World Student Christian Federation, which PS has been around since 1897, you know, whatever. I'm an LGBTQ outreach coordinator, which means that I reach out to all the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning people in the entirety of the United States and Canada. Whatever. Easy, easy. In comparison to what we're dealing with here, easy. And you know how I do it is by creating a church with a roof, but no walls. And so I meet people individually, one by one, talking about how they uniquely contribute to the ecumenical conversation about Christianity. We come up with projects that I never would have been able to imagine by myself, like pastoral care guides for LGBTQ youth homeless people, like videos for seminarians speaking for LGBTQ rights, like interviewing ex-gay ministry people. These ideas are walking out on a limb, pun intended, because that's what we need to be doing as a church. And so I'm talking about this like box tree model, and everyone hears about the box, and they're like, no, that's poopy. And then everyone hears about the tree, and they're like, yeah, that's great. Which is really easy to say in this tent with delicious food and fun people. But when we get in there, we're going to be hearing a lot of box. And you have to be advocating for some tree, y'all. So be careful. Because I don't know if any of you have ever done some organic gardening, but growing stuff takes work. And not just a one-time explosion of effort, but the slow, patient hammering of many people working together. And that has to be us. That has to be the church if young adults are going to be with us. And by the way, that also requires funding. So when you're talking about the budget, when you're reading that call to action, which by the way, like hardly mentions young adults at all, keep that in mind and remember that to grow this orchard of the kingdom, to create this holy canopy, we're going to need a lot of help. All hands on deck. Amen.